All right, guys, I'm back. This thing keeps cutting me off. You guys know how bad I am with technology, so I really don't understand what's going on here. But anyway, I'll try to do something different tomorrow. So let's see if we can finish up. We got a few minutes left on Chapter 7, Lesson 1. So I was talking about the National Assembly. They're divided into three groups, and so we're going to talk about where they sat in the room, which normally would be trivial. But in this case, it has something to do with modern American politics. All right, so first of all, you had the radicals, and the radicals, they sat on the left side of the room. When you walked in the door, they were on the left side of the room. And radical means, of course, you want something completely different than the way things have been. And so these guys wanted a republic. That was the type of, they wanted to get rid of the monarchy altogether and create a republic. All right, and then the second group were the moderates. They sat in the middle of the room or the center of the room when you came in. And so a moderate, they want some change, but not really radical change. So what they wanted was a limited monarchy. Let's keep the monarch, but we don't want him to be absolute anymore. We'd like to have some limits and where some other people have some rights. And then speaking of the right, on the right side of the room were a group called the Royalists. Okay, and they sat on the right side, and they, of course, they want to continue the absolute monarchy. They don't want to change anything. They just want to keep the system the way it was. You still got to figure out some way to get out of all this debt, but they don't want to get rid of the absolute monarchy. All right, and so sitting on the side of the room, that's what's got to do. Sometimes in modern American politics, you will hear on the news, well, this guy leans to the left or she leans to the right, or it doesn't mean one leg is shorter than the other or anything like that. It means that's how we describe our political system. So today, if you're on the left, that typically means you are a liberal, which for the most part would be the Democrat Party in the United States. If you are on the right, it means you are a conservative, and typically that would mean also that you are probably more likely to be a Republican. Okay, so the Democrats are more liberal, so it's said in the political spectrum they lean to the left. The Republicans are more conservative. It says on the political spectrum they lean to the right. So sometimes you'll hear that on the news. Well, this is an idea that comes from the right, or this is an idea on the left, or he or she's on the left or the right. That's kind of what that means. Okay, but it comes from this French Revolution where these people were sitting on different sides of the room. And so the liberals, historically, they had wanted very different ideas, and conservatives, historically, they'd wanted to maintain tradition and keep the old ways. And so that's kind of how this got translated into modern American politics. All right, so when they first start off, the moderates are really going to kind of dominate early on in the early phase of the French Revolution. And the moderates are going to put together a document called the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. Okay, and so this is passed on August the 26th, 1789. So, roughly 5 or 6 weeks after the storming of the Bastille. This document was inspired by the founding of the United States. The documents that we had are Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and this is also inspired by the English Bill of Rights. And so I'm just going to give you just a couple of the main points. This document declared that all men were equal, still didn't give equal rights to women, but all men were going to be equal, kind of getting rid of the estate thing. And everybody now has to pay taxes. So nobody was exempt from paying taxes. It did declare that everyone had natural rights. And so Locke had talked about life, liberty, and property. Jefferson changed it to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. In France, they described that there were 4 natural rights. These were equality, liberty, security, and property. Equality, liberty, security, and property. Those were the 4 natural rights described in this document. It did provide for freedom of speech. It also provided for freedom of the press and freedom of religion. Now, this is when they began to use a slogan that we talked about, was actually had come from the philosophes, liberty, equality, and fraternity. Okay, so this is going to be the slogan of the French Revolution. Everybody should have freedom, everybody should be equal, and we should be a brotherhood of man. All right, so this describes that power and participation in the political process was now going to be based on property ownership rather than birth or titles. So you had a property requirement. You had to own some property, but it no longer mattered whether you had a title or not. It didn't really matter what your family name was or where you were born. They do get rid of those things, but you had to own at least a little bit of property. All right, now, as we said, this really didn't address women. It said all men were equal. So at about the same time, shortly after this, Olympia de Gouges, she writes the Declaration of the Rights of Women, in which basically she demands equal rights for women. She said the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen did not address women at all, still kept them as second-class citizens, and so she wants women to have more equal rights. She's not really going to get anywhere with that. Eventually, when the radicals take control, they're going to completely ban women from all political life. They don't want women to be involved at all. She, of course, will express her opposition to the reign of terror that they're going to conduct, and she will be sent to the guillotine in November of 1793. She has her head chopped off because she was fighting for women's rights, and the radicals had no interest in that. All right, so when this document comes out, King Louis XVI, of course, doesn't want to accept it. It limits quite a bit his rights. He's no longer absolute. So we said this was a moderate-driven document. So they want to keep Louis as the king, but they do want to limit his power. He really doesn't like that much at all. And so a lot of people are kind of afraid, is he going to plot against the revolution, which he is. And they want to try to have a little bit better control on him. So in October of 1789, a group of about 7,000 women, they march out to the Palace of Versailles, and they demand that Louis and Marie and their children, we'll talk about the children a little bit later, they demand that they move into Paris. Versailles, again, is kind of outside of Paris. They wanted Louis in Paris so they could keep an eye on him and see who he's talking to, who's coming to see him, who's he writing letters to, just in case he's plotting against the revolution. And as we said, he will, because he doesn't want to give up his power. And so Louis agrees. He doesn't want to cause any more problems, so he packs up the wife and kids, and they move into Paris. And this way the revolutionaries can keep an eye on them. Well, again, this is in October 1789. In June of 1791, the royal family do not like the way things are going, so Louis decides they're going to try to get out of France, and they try to escape. Well, where would they go? Well, the most obvious place is to try to go to Austria. Marie Antoinette is from there. She hopes that her royal family will help them out. And so they need to disguise themselves. And hey, guess what? Remember, Marie Antoinette has a peasant village, and she dresses up like a peasant. So she has peasant costumes. So they dress up like peasants. They try to escape to Austria. However, they don't make it. They're captured. They're taken back to Paris. Somebody recognized them in spite of the costumes. They're taken back to Paris, and they're put under house arrest. So at least they don't go to prison, but they're locked up in the palace, and where everybody can kind of keep an eye on them. And we'll come back to what happens to them a little bit later. All right, the church policy. The government, again, headed by the moderates at this point, they decided to take the land that belonged to the church because they still have the debt problem. They haven't solved that at this point. So they just basically steal all this land from the Catholic Church, and then they sell it and use the money to pay off the national debt. And the church was certainly allowed to rebuy its land, but of course, we already owned it the first time. Well, you can buy it again if you want. So they could buy it if they wanted to. Anybody could buy it, but they used that money to try to pay off the church debt. The government abolished the tithe. They got rid of that, said people should still give to the church, but they could choose how much. They declared that priests would now be elected by the people. and the priests would be paid by the government. The idea here was to reduce the power of the Pope. But this angers a lot of people in France and turns a lot of them against the revolution because, again, France was still predominantly a Catholic country. And so this does cost the revolutionaries a little bit of their popularity. Okay. Well, as we're going to see, they're not going to stick with one constitution very long. They're going to constantly be changing things up, and they're going to change things again in 1791. But I see our time limit is really up, so I want to close it out here. So hopefully we'll pick it up on Tuesday, and I'll try to figure out these technical difficulties, see if I can make this work a little better. So as always, if you guys have any questions, please just email me, and I will try to answer you and help you in any way I can. So again, be safe, be cool, and we'll talk to you later.